Sue and David, and we're looking at these pictures from prior to the theatre being completed. So, do you mind talking us through them?
Yeah, this one. I'll start then. This is the model of the theatre as it was originally conceived, which was rather different to what we have now. But originally, it was thought that the stage was going to be in the area that's now the foyer bar, and that the seating would sort of come out at sort of at right angles to where it is now, and that the entrance would be round the back here. So that's what that one's all about. But the others are.
This is mid-70s. This one.
Sort of,
Well,
yeah.
when we first got that was originally the kitchen garden,
Yeah.
When we
and we had standpipes and a greenhouse.
So did you use some in the 70s there, that original at the top left? Did you use those buildings, or did you just have the
We
land?
rented them from the council.
Right.
Yeah, mainly the parts inside the courtyard. But what you can see here is when we originally we just had a tenancy of some very small parts of it, and then we got a longer lease, and we built this wall here.
Because it was a carriage store.
That runs across what is now the sort of front of the stage. If you can imagine, this is the auditorium. That's the stage in there. And we built this wall in order to create a rehearsal room. There was a bar off where now the downstage dressing room is. And there was a mounting block in the corner. I'm not sure you can still
You can see where the brick was.
See where it was, perhaps. Yeah. So when the construction began, we were kind of undoing some of the work that we'd fairly recently completed, taking all that away. And as you can see, this is a sort of later stage where you can see through into the same area there, the area that is now the stage, and that's the foyer bar over there. This is the auditorium itself. And here you've got an aerial view taken from the top of Longshore. And it says here, look, the caption says 1991. Looking down, you can see the theatre now beginning to take shape, and the steels here that form the basis of the workshop. And again, here you can see those same steels and the walls having been built up, and the entrance through there. So it tells a lot of the history of the original construction.
Right. So Pam, we're talking about the building when it was first opened back in the early 90s. But before we get to that, I'm assuming that you were very much involved in the vision from some time before that.
Oh, yes. At the beginning, I think, of Vision was when Michael Green, that's Art of Course Acting Michael Green, came to talk to the players in the PA hall. And somebody, I've got a feeling it was Alan, said to him, if we want to get a theatre in Chipstead, well, how do we go about it? Michael Green, which you probably know, was part of the Questors Theatre, and he'd been part of the creating that. And Michael Green said, the first thing, get a bar. Sell drinks, get a bar, make some money, and you spread it from there. And so help me, that's actually what we did.
That we used. We used to store the scenery in here, which is where the foyer bar is, so the flats were propped up against the stalls. And then there was a garage here, which is now the current rehearsal room, which we also used as a rehearsal room with concrete floor and a pit for the cars to be serviced. And then further up this way, which is in this room, we had paint store.
And presumably a lot of the work that was completed, this was done through voluntary work. It was you guys coming up and...
Yeah. I mean, a lot of the work we did actually in the courtyard itself. And I do remember one occasion, it was bitterly cold up here and we needed to paint some flats. Actually trying to dilute the paint with snow and failing miserably. I mean, you just get paint with ice crystals in it. It doesn't work. But that was why, because it was so cold and we needed to get on and paint, that's what we were trying to do with the paint. But, yeah.
And then the actual acquisition by the players of this space was that sort of around the late 70s, early 80s?
Yes, it would have been. Yes, it would have been. It's obviously all provable somewhere, but not in my head.
No, but I'm guessing that then there followed a period of 10 years of fundraising, planning.
Well, we didn't initially. I think Len and I had actually secretly got in the back of our minds we'd like to build a theatre, but the initial acquisition was really on the basis that it would be a club room, a bar, of course, storage, rehearsal space, but we got on using the village hall, which of course we did.
Yes.
And then after a number of years, we sort of put our hands up and admitted what we'd really like to do is build a theatre.
So when did the real impetus start? And was there something that triggered it to say, right, let's do it?
Triggered it particularly. It was just that, we got over the shock of being freeholders suddenly. We owned this place, albeit it was a bit of a wreck. We'd done a heck of a lot of work to it ourselves. We never had, did we ever have contractors? I don't think we did. When we put the first bar in and toilets and created the rehearsal room, we did all our own.
Can we call in about some of those early working parties?
So the working parties, we had one particular weekend. It was the weekend of the first lottery. And on the Sunday, I believe it was the Sunday, we formed a chain across the car park to carry all the bricks that had been salvaged from the actual courtyard. And they're now round, they've all been used, and they've formed the pathway to the entrance. And I said to Pam Jarrett, who was then chairman, if I win the lottery tonight, well, it was the day before, wasn't it? Anyway, it's new material. If I win the lottery tonight, you can have the money for the car park.
Right.
Because it was misty, it was November, it was foul weather. We were all out there doing it.
Right, fantastic.
Yeah.
Lovely story.
And there's quite a lot of the work, the labour that went into putting this together was actually people like yourself and members.
Yeah. I mean, we employed a professional brickie. The steelwork contractors was given to an outside contract. Roy Elliott was a quantity surveyor, so he was able to order all the materials. Brian Drury was an architect, so he was able to interpret all the original drawings and provide us all with the working drawings. A lot of us became experts at tiling. I don't know how many tiles we put on this roof here. We employed electricians, that was something else. I don't know how many miles of cable we got in this place. Must have been one hell of a lot.
Yeah.
But no, I was up here virtually daily.
So in actual fact, there was probably a gang of fellas that pretty much worked full time on this for 6 months.
Well, on Sundays, of course, there was a lot of people up here.
Yeah.
But yes, we did. We progressed as far as the fundraising was concerned, of which Len Jarrett was an expert at going around and conning people out of their life savings.
I remember. Yeah.
And Anne and David Franks thankfully bought Stable Cottage at the back here. The players managed to scrape the money to go this bit. Gentleman who's very recently passed away actually bought the stables and the field in front of Longshore House, and we had to sell off plan the flats in Longshore.
Right.
And trying to persuade people they were getting a thumping good deal, which they were, because they were buying it wholesale. We weren't making a profit. We were the developers, but
Yeah.
not for any profit. So we had to get, I think it was 13 all told, if including the acquisition contract. 13 contracts, all in a row, all exchanged on the same day, and all completed on the same day, because we didn't have any money, so we were relying on the purchasers, we being the Preservation Society.
Yeah.
And by some miracle we did it, still not quite sure how. We got it to a point where you had all 13 contracts agreed, and then somebody drop out. And you had to rush around and find another buyer for a flat.
Right.
Always the flats that fell.
But one of the things that I think is quite interesting or important is the fact that when you go to the theatre now, so many people are coming to it new, don't realise that everything about it is voluntary. From the people that take your coat to the people welcoming you in the car park, and
The only paid person are the cleaners.
yes, and the interesting thing is that there are lots of new people that see it as the great facility that it is now, and I think that it's quite important to remember the spirit of that was there that built it in the first place. So I think it's important to talk to everybody and to get all this on record, because people forget, they just assume it's there for them, and it's
The concept of voluntary work isn't in everybody's psyche.
No.
So a lot of we wouldn't have done it if we hadn't wanted to do it, and to then see it all come to fruition was absolutely amazing. And when we first opened, of course, it wasn't even finished, so it did continue for quite some time.
yes, yeah. But I guess it was a passion of the people in the players and the people that wanted their own theatre, wasn't it? So
Yes, I suppose, we all were looking for different things from the theatre. I mean, I joined the players to act. Len joined because I was joining.
Yeah.
He had acted with Our Good Companions years before. Who gets the first part? He does. And I prompted the first play that he did.
Now, one particular moment I remember is Pam Jarrett, who was the stage manager of it. She looked so excited as she opened the curtains for the first time.
I can imagine. And of course, you were involved in some of the fundraising activities, in the lead up to the theatre being built and finished. Were there any that really sort of stick in the memory?
The main one I really remember is the Acreathon, which was quite an incredible enterprise, really. The fact that all of Alan Ayckbourn's plays were read over one entire weekend here, and I think most of us at the time were asked to come and be in 2 of the play readings, and I think we all did one at some kind of vaguely sociable time and one at one incredibly unsociable time. And one of the ones I did was the play Time and Time Again, which I'd actually been in here, fed only a few months earlier.
At the PA Hall?
At the PA Hall,
yes.
yeah, where we had an incredible set, complete with a real garden. There really was grass, there was a real pond, all on the stage at the PA Hall.
So the history of great sets predates the theatre?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It was amazing what they used to be able to put up at the PA Hall.
Yeah.
Quite unbelievable. And that one looked absolutely real with this garden there. And yes, we did that one about 3 o'clock in the morning. I think we read through Time and Time Again. But for that one, it was the only one where they actually got the whole cast back exactly as those of us who had performed it.
Wow, but at 3 o'clock in the morning?
But at 3 o'clock in the morning. And because we knew it so well, we actually had quite a lot of fun with it and started doing it all in silly accents, and I think I even translated my lines into German at one point to keep us all sort of going and having fun with it. But
This weekend saw a non-stop play reading of the complete works of Alan Ayckbourn to raise money for the Courtyard Theatre. Caroline Wilson was there to tread the boards.
These old stables in the grounds of the Longshore estate are gradually being turned into the Courtyard Theatre. Last weekend, in an effort to raise enough money for the theatre to be completed, the players held a non-stop play reading of the complete works of Alan Ayckbourn.
It's a reading of all Ayckbourn's published plays to raise money through sponsorship to build our theatre.
And when did it start?
It started on Friday evening at the Peter Overton Hall, where we generally put on our productions, and then we moved over to our headquarters here at the Courtyard in Chipstead.
So it's been going all night, hasn't it?
Yes.
And when will it finish?
It finishes Sunday lunchtime, we hope.
You've been taking it in turns to read throughout the night. How did you decide who should have the short straw and do the night shift?
We had surprisingly volunteers to come in the night, and we had the backstage crew volunteered because they didn't want to be watched by anybody. So we had a big team of them to read Small Family Business.
Have you been reading yourself throughout the night?
Yes, I was reading at 2 and then I appeared again at 7 o'clock this morning. So I had 2 hours sleep last night and I'm reading again tomorrow.
Yes, and the chief of these very wild animals...
I'm sorry, Reg, fair shares for all. You're welcome to mine.
You're in no danger of overeating.
I think I'm going to give this story up.
Yeah. Do you remember any of the events that you did that
Well, the
sort of spring to
Acreton
mind?
was the famous one where Alan Ayckbourn gave us permission to do it all without any royalties, where we read the entire of his plays over a 24-hour period.
I didn't realise that bit about the royalties. That's generous of him, actually, wasn't it, to do that?
He wrote to us and he said, would we mind if he didn't come along? And one famous thing with Ron Stevens, who again is no longer with us, he was up, because we were all night obviously, he was up all night with one part and it turned out to be a non-speaking part.
And it was great fun. I think it was a great challenge and a great way to raise the money. The other one I have vague memory of was a cow splat activity where they had a chart really, and which represented a field, and you had to choose a square and hope that when the cow was released into the field, that was where
hit your spot. Tell me a little bit about the clearing of the car park. Was it hard work? Was it good fun?
Clearing a car park, I don't remember it that well because heck of a long time ago and I'm an old man. But I remember parking probably in the road outside, coming along in willy boots, shifting loads of bricks, plants, rocks and everything else so we could get the car park ready for people to come in the following day to lay down asphalt. I also remember commenting, I was talking to Len Jarrett at the time, and Chris Cartley had just managed to get the boiler fired up and this plume of white smoke came out of the chimney. And then said to me, Chris has got the boiler fired up. I said, yes, we've elected a new pope.
Things of... this, of course, out there, which is our car park, was the cottage garden of the of Longshore, which if you look at one of the walls, there's traces of white paint, which is where the greenhouse was.
Right.
And where we're parking the cars, which needs redoing now because it's been down for 20 years, that was our quagmire of a ready coloured clay. We put tons and tons of these white chips that you put between railway sleepers, and they just disappeared in it. And scalpings at the time, there was no market for them, and the contractors were wondering how to get rid of them. And we had 18 inches of scalpings free of charge dumped in there, and so we conned somebody with a roller to roll it down, and it's lasted us now for 20 years.
So here we are in the control room, and I would imagine that you can remember, because you were very much part of it, when this was all being put together.
Well, I can certainly remember when we got our first new switchboard. It had 60 dimmers stretched across that you would fade up and down like that with 2 masters, which we hadn't had before. And it took up this much room. And so for the first production that we did, Tom Jones, that was the first time that I'd used the board. people got more expert at it as we went on. And then the sound was over here. Well, it still is, but there's less of it now because it's all miniaturised.
The equipment was this with the sort of fundraising efforts to get this sort of gear, or was it sort of begged and borrowed? And
it came from another theatre, and I think we got it through John Simpson, who runs a company called White Light, that is a very big professional lighting company now. But he was a member of the juniors when I was in the juniors, and so he then started his little, when he was at the Royal Court Theatre, he started his little refurbished lights that he was hiring out. And when we rewired the PA hall, he gave us all the equipment, and well, he didn't give it, we bought it, you know,
right.
He provided it. And we wired it in ourselves, and then when we got here, I think we must have got that switchboard through here.
These dimmer racks would be 40 years old at least, I would think.
Right.
You know, they've been running for 20 years here, and they were past their useful life for Thames TV when we got them. But they're well built, and they work, so we keep them going as long as we can.
Okay, so here I am in the prop store with Pauline, who's been gathering all of these bits and pieces for quite some time, as you can see in actual fact from the amount of goods and chattels we have here. So tell me, Pauline, where does it all come from?
Begged, borrowed and stolen, if we're on a play, but if not, from charity shops. Somebody might donate. And if anybody says to me, I've got a whatever, my immediate comment always is, I never refuse.
Right.
And then if it's not right, then it would go to a charity shop. It would never, ever go in the bin. I wouldn't do that.
Whilst the theatre was being built, we had to empty the wardrobe, which was not in this part of the building, and take it down to the hairdressers in Chipstead and stored it in their cellar, basement area. So we had to bag everything up. And when the building was finished, enough for us to come back up here, and all the shelving was put in, which was fantastic, we then emptied all the clothes into the auditorium.
So they were there for how long?
Oh, I can't remember. I don't know. Months. They were there for months in black sacks, really. So we brought them back here and then sorted everything and boxed everything up. And quite recently, we had a couple of ladies, Audrey and Liz, labelled all the boxes and made up a fantastic index, which means that everything's much easier to locate now.
Well, yeah, it's tidier, it's black, and it's cooler. It used to get very hot.
I can imagine it would have done.
Yeah, because you've got 2 layers of glass here, safety glass and ordinary glass, which actually makes it quite difficult to see the stage.
Right.
If you're short like me.
Right.
I used to do the cues standing up because then I could see. But it's wonderful because at the Peter Orbiton Hall, you were sitting at the back, but you had no contact with people backstage, and you couldn't really see what was going on, whereas here you've got a complete view. It's absolutely wonderful being able to see the stage. And
well, there we go. As
yeah.
we speak, there's the next production in rehearsal. That's fantastic.
And we did have some beautiful sort of antique pieces of clothing and 1920s things which we did actually sell on at an auction because they were too perfect and beautiful to use in the theatre. But
where did they all come from?
Donations over the years and things we've bought for a play, or many things we've made. Lots and lots of things we've made, some of which get reused and some of them don't, some of them we hire out. And it's just a whole variety of things.
Right then, David, so we're in the workroom now. Now, this, of course, used to be the outside, didn't it?
Yes, it was the outside air here, but we had this specially constructed as part of the construction of the theatre, and specifically with an idea that it should be our workshop and storage area, and it is very much used for that now. It's rather full at the moment, and it is indeed rather full most of the time, and we do a lot of the construction on the stage itself, and it's a constant struggle really to force ourselves to throw things away. And if you don't do that, then it just fills itself up. But,
And is it something that you actually enjoy because, you know, finding the right style?
Oh, no, yeah, no. And if you ask anybody who's been involved with me on a play, they will tell you I'm very picky. And I need to get it right, even down to the postage stamp on an envelope.
Right.
Because there will be somebody in the front row who collects stamps.
And how long have you actually been involved in the society? How long have you been involved with the Chipstead Players?
Since 1949.
1949.
Yes, I was 7.
So we're just having a look at the sort of the lighting rig and everything from the stage, John. So presumably a lot of this stuff is fairly new.
There's not very much up there that dates back to when we first moved in. It's virtually all been replaced over the years.
So we've now got everything marked. Since we've had this massive turnout, tried to mark everything, to put everything together so people can actually see where it all belongs.
And actually don't get it wrong when they need a period piece.
If they need a
because it's
period,
clear.
yes. I mean, I'm still trying to do it, but I'm starting to put the labels on the bottles now, so that if you've got a gin bottle in up until a certain date, they're square, a Gordon's, and now it's got a rounded back to it.
Right.
So it's just, I know it's me being picky.
But it's all these nuances
but it's
that make the
yes,
difference.
and if costumes have worked hard, and if the set designer has worked hard, then props has got to be right, otherwise it stands out like a sore thumb.
basically everything that you need to be able to work with timber we've got here. There's not a lot of metalworking equipment, and we've tended not to get involved with things like fiberglass and so on, but we use metal a lot more than we used to. We use scaffolding quite a bit, and generally speaking, we reckon we can handle most things we're thrown at.
How many sets have you been involved in building?
I've no idea, but if I think about this for a moment, I think I've been a member for 47 years. I must have done, on average, 3 sets a year.
Right, so well into treble figures.
Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic.
Oh, hello. Come around here, just let go.
I saw this, that's gorgeous, isn't it? Oh,
That's what I understand.
brilliant.
Racial it's called a...
Oh, that's what it was, wasn't it? Yeah.
Come on.
Oh, well, I like this.
Mr. Mayor, ladies and gentlemen, as chairman of the Chipstead Players, it gives me enormous pleasure to welcome you here to what for us is a very exciting day. I'm sorry we couldn't arrange the weather. I think a few of us prayed, but obviously not hard enough. Sorry. Our dream of a theatre of our own is really getting closer as we complete the structure this morning. Effectively, in front of you all and before the eyes of our mayor, our rector, councillors, representatives from most of our village societies, past and present members, and many friends. Shortly, I shall ask the mayor to set in motion this somewhat altered ceremony of topping out by signing the tile in question. And together with his signature will be that of our youngest actress, Hannah here. So her name will go up on the roof on that tile forever and ever and ever. How about that? Well, we hope so. He'll then, when he's signed it, he'll put a dollop of cement in the bottom of the tile, and until they'll get passed out from your sight. As far as you know, it's going straight up on the roof. But first, before I ask him to set that ceremony going, I am going to ask the Mayor of Reigate and Banstead, Councillor Alan Kay, to say a few words to us. Lovely. Lovely to be on the other side. How about that? Thank you. Now we want Hannah Dowling written on there, don't we? I'll try and keep it still for you. Nice and big, yes. As big as. Lovely. Very good.
A topping out ceremony traditionally provides the opportunity to express our thanks to all who've been in so very many different ways contributed to this building. I've been given very strict instructions that under no circumstances am I to refer to anyone by name. So I'll refer to you all collectively, which makes me really wonder what the correct collective noun is for a group of architects. I thought it might be a gaggle of architects, but I was suggested yesterday that it might be hysteria. Finally, I'd like to express very fully our true thanks to those generous outside donors, as well as all our members, without whose support in so many different ways today could not have become a reality. You've helped not only financially, but you've given of your time, and indeed some very fully, to help speed the realisation of our ultimate objective. On behalf of the Executive Committee and the Courtyard Theatre Committee, thank you all very much indeed.
And a full house. Lovely.
Really? A full house?
They'll be standing in the vaults.
Do you know, they bombed the Grand Theatre Plymouth.
And much else in the city
So you appeared in the first thing that was ever put on here in Tom Jones, and the most recent, Wife After Death.
Yep.
How have things changed over that period of time?
It's interesting to look at it. I mean, I think the main thing is that when we did Tom Jones, it was terribly exciting. Here was this brand new theatre. I think everybody here who acted here at the time was desperate to be in the first show that was in the theatre. The theatre was not complete at the time. It was probably from the public's point of view. There were no dressing rooms here at all.
No dressing rooms?
No, none at all. And it was quite a long time, in fact, before the dressing rooms were finished. The kind of space was there, and it was actually kind of impossible to imagine how these were going to be turned into dressing rooms. But it was actually, I think, several years before the dressing rooms were completed. So back then, we had to change in here, in the rehearsal room.
Right.
And for probably, I think for Tom Jones, can't quite remember, but we probably had more than one space that we were changing in, because there were a lot of people in that production. It was deliberately chosen to be something that lots of people could be in. So I think we probably used the Jared room as well. But that's probably one of the biggest changes. The fact that the theatre wasn't really quite...
It wasn't finished.
It wasn't finished.
I imagine that it was quite an emotional evening, the opening night, when the first show in the
Oh
new...
yeah, absolutely. And I was in charge of the food, well, what do you call it, food? Catering. The
Right.
catering for the opening, for the 2 gala nights. So I was in the kitchen, and that afternoon Len Jarrett was walking around with the person to get the licence, and I'm burning volleyball in the kitchen and the fire alarm's going off, and somebody's going, well, at least it works. And then I said to Len, what happens if we don't get the licence? And he said, well, we just have a big party. But it was that close.
Yes.
And it was just, when you got it, yes.
For Tom Jones, the structure was just about there and it was ready to go, but there's been a lot of work to finish it off over a period.
Last minute. I mean, we actually got our licence as a theatre licence at 3:30 in the afternoon.
It wasn't finished. And how did it feel, sort of performing in front of audiences that you knew large proportions of that audience had something to do with either the fundraising or the building of the theatre that you were in? Did that make it different?
I I think it was, you felt a kind of responsibility that this had to be a really good play, and it was, being a large cast show, it was quite difficult to rehearse as well. There were a lot of people with big scenes to do. So there weren't those moments when you thought, is this ever going to be ready on time? And yeah, I think that was the main thing, that you felt that this really had to be great. But by the time we finally got to the opening night, I think we all thought, yes, I think we're ready.
Just a sense of pride, of achievement, what panic?
No, I don't think things that Bert didn't develop into a panic. He was a very good organiser. I was his, what do you want to call it, production secretary, sidekick. I used to take rehearsals if he couldn't get up. And it, you know, we rehearsed it up to the point that we felt, right, we're ready to go, which was lovely.